You're rising up in Microsoft. You're running the business solutions division at one point, but then they say to you, we'd like you to run the search business called Bing. And did you say, you can't compete against Google, I don't want to do that? Or did you say, no, I'm happy to do that?
You know, it is, I had just been promoted to lead our business solutions team. And I mean, I was loving that job. It's something that I'd aspired to do. And Steve comes around and he says, hey, you know what? I have an idea for you. I think you should go run this group that's got high attrition, and we have a very tough task ahead. And I don't know whether it's a good career move, but yeah, I need help, and you know, think wisely and choose. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting choice in front of me. And I remember very distinctly, you know, going that night to the building in which the Bing team and our search team was housed. And it was, what, maybe 9 o'clock or so, and the parking lot was full, people were in. And I said, wow, what's the deal here? I mean, these people are like working and inspired, and so I said, well, I got to join this team. I got to, like, the fight that they showed caused me to not take the easy path and get in.
Okay. Well, did Steve say, if you do this well, we'll be happy. If you don't do it well, you might not get another job?
That's correct. And that was, you know, Steve was, one of the things that is amazing of both Bill and Steve is their candor. It's not like they sugarcoat anything. They're very, very honest about most things in life, or everything in life. And they were sort of very clear. Look, if you do a good job, maybe you will have another job. If not, you won't.
So you did a pretty good job, and then they came along and asked you to run another business which was not that competitive at the time, and that was your cloud computing business. How did it happen that Amazon, which was not a computer company, more or less, became a giant in cloud, and Microsoft, right nearby, wasn't a giant there?
The interesting thing is, what happens when a company becomes successful is this beautiful virtuous cycle that gets created between your concept or product, your capability, and your culture. Right, you really have all these three things fall into gear, and they're working super well. But then what happens is the concept that made you successful runs out of gas. It's not growing anymore. You now need new capability. And in order to have that new capability, you need a culture that allows you to grow that new capability, right? Our server business was growing strong double digits. It was a high margin business. And you look around, you know, on the other side of the lake, here is a very low margin business called the cloud. And people will look at that and say, why would we do that when we have such an amazing, fast growing, high margin business? And that, I think, is the challenge. And so to be able to see these secular trends long before they become conventional wisdom, change your business model, change your technology, and change the product is the challenge of business. You know, in tech, it's unforgiving. But quite frankly, now that tech is part of every business, I think all of us have to deal with it.
So you get to be the CEO of this company. You're following two legendary figures. How do you go to them and say, by the way, a lot of things you did, I don't want to do anymore. I'm going to change things?
I was a consummate insider, right? I spent 22 years or so when I became CEO. Growing up in the company that Bill and Steve built, I understood like the back of my palm all the things we got right and all the things we got wrong. And I had a point of view on what I wanted to do if I was going to become CEO.
We now need to make Microsoft thrive in a mobile-first and a cloud-first world.
It was not about trying to criticize our past or praise the past. It was about what do we do in the future.
One of the things you tried to do and change the culture was to change what was known as a very proprietary culture at Microsoft. Microsoft said, this is the way we do things. We don't want to cooperate with other firms, necessarily competitors or other kinds of firms. How did you change that culture?
I said, look, let me not view things as zero-sum. If anything, let me approach even who are our traditional competitors and say, well, customers are heterogeneous. They use some of what we do and some of what you do. Let's figure out a way to combine forces where it's market expansive and it satisfies customers. So at least that's how I've approached it. And it's a lesson I learned in my early days of Microsoft.
historically, Windows and Office were your two cash cows. They are still the biggest source of profit?
Absolutely.
So after those two, and you suspect they'll be major source of profit for a long time.
Absolutely.
But after that, you have other things. You spent $26 billion, the biggest acquisition ever for Microsoft, to buy LinkedIn. What does LinkedIn have to do with Microsoft?
If you look at it, we have 1 billion users of Windows and Office, or Microsoft 365. And what is the common thread there? They're all professionals. They're all people who are trying to get things done. So we have the professional cloud and the professional devices in the world. And the vision was to combine that with the professional network of LinkedIn. In fact, if you look at some of the integrations that we have since launched, you can be in Outlook. You can get an email. I can get an email from David Rubinstein. I can go look up your LinkedIn profile, which I hope you have.
I'll get one today, but yes.
And then sort of look up all of the mutual connections we may have. So the idea that the professional network and the professional content can be brought together, I think ultimately can be a big driver of productivity. So that is one. But one of the other pieces which has been a real game changer for us is LinkedIn is the way people do business-to-business sales. And if you want to be able to reach customers and sell, this integration is going to be game-changing.
Okay.
Same thing with talent management. So I think we have lots of synergies between the products that are now coming true.
February 4th, 2014, you were named the third CEO in Microsoft's history. You're here with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, the prior two. What was going through your mind at this point, and what do you wish you could go back and tell that guy in the middle right now about what he was about to face?
You know, I, Todd, am a consummate insider. I grew up in the company that Bill and Steve built. Everything that I've learned, everything about me has been shaped by the company I worked for, which is Microsoft, for now 25 years, and obviously something that wouldn't have happened but for one of the greatest partnerships in business history, which is the partnership of Bill and Steve. And as I distinctly remember that day and leading up to that day, because it was not really long before that day I even knew that I was going to be CEO. The thing that I was seeking the most, and in particular based on all of the people around me that you see even in that photograph, is asking that existential question and being able to answer it for myself, which is, why do we as a company exist? You could say, what sort of a silly sort of way to start, but I do believe that. I do believe companies exist for a reason. There needs to be a sense of purpose. If there's going to be long-term success, you can't be bound by one brand, one product, one technology wave. It's got to go beyond that, right? Because anything that you started with is not going to last forever. But what is that core sense of purpose that can really help drive? And then, of course, what's the culture that will then help you reinforce that sense of purpose with every changing technology wave? So those were the things that, now I see it even 3.5, and in fact, this entire book came about not as some kind of we've reached any destination. If anything, it's reflections of a sitting CEO going through that process, that hard process of transformation, which, by the way, I posit is a continuous process. You'll never, ever reach your destination. How do you keep hitting refresh and being smart about it? That's what I would sort of say. I was pretty naive even 3.5 years ago about all of what I at least now know a bit of. And all I know is I need to learn a lot more.
Looking at this, it strikes me that Bill and Paul and then Bill and Steve had each other. There was a partnership. There were two partnerships that resulted in this company, really. You don't have a singular partner. You have what you call in the book a legion of superheroes,
right.
the SLT, as the Microsoft insiders would call it. How has that changed your leadership of the company, the way the company is run, and ultimately the culture of Microsoft?
In fact, Steve was the one who was switched me on to this even, which is he had once reflected when he was CEO about how even in his tenure and his and Bill's tenure, as you rightfully said, it was Paul and Bill and then Bill and Steve, they built the company. Many management teams came and went, but they were constant. And so they could provide that continuity in their own way. And they realized that when the next CEO is going to be in place, the way that CEO will need to operate is going to be very different. And also the business, especially when I was talking to Paul recently, is when it struck me, right? How different the company is than the company that Paul worked at. In terms of its scope, its size, its complexity, its operation. So the thing that Steve was in fact trying to even do in his own tenure at Microsoft was to build more of a leadership team. For me, of course, it's an absolute necessity. There is no way I could operate with the context and the depth. I mean, Steve could do pretty much anybody's job better than anybody. I mean, he had such immense intellectual horsepower. I clearly don't. And the thing that I wanted to make sure is bring the team and also have that ownership for this is our company. And that's something that I've always felt, which is, and this is not just for the SLT, I want people inside the company to feel it's their company so that they can use it as a platform to realize their own mission and their own personal philosophy. And that's sort of what I believe applies to the leadership team as well.